We're recording. Hello and welcome to the Immigration Podcast. I am former immigration judge and immigration attorney Rob Ratliff. And with me today is our co-host,
Susan Miller, former DHS ICE prosecutor for 26 years and at Hiller Law Group.
Yeah, and I sent emails to our other friendly immigration attorneys, Nora and Anis, and we'll see if they pop in. But so, anything interesting happening in immigration this week?
Oh yeah, so I'm really outraged at the Minnesota shooting because I try to back up now and look at it before I make a conclusion. And I watched it, and I don't see any justification whatsoever for what they did. Here's the thing, Rob, like for 26 years, and I know I say that a lot, I'm sorry, but it's a lot of time in my life, right? So being with Legacy, INS, Immigration and Naturalization Service, and then ICE as an attorney, we advise the deportation officers and special agents. I also taught at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center on use of force and constitutional and civil rights of people. And what I'm baffled and outraged by is because my agency, and I say my agency, my former agency that I identified with, I don't remember any shootings. I don't remember anyone being killed.
That's a good point. I've done this for a long time. I don't remember any DHS ICE shootings. I'm sure there's probably been some Border Patrol issues.
Oh, definitely. Definitely Border Patrol. When I say, I guess I shouldn't say
interior enforcement. I don't recall ever hearing about an interior enforcement shooting in DHS.
No, and they still went out and got gang members, murderers, rapists. I mean, some of those people, are in prison, so it's a lot easier. But even using the marshals, when they do the marshals task force back in the day, and my I have former boyfriends, and my daughter's father was a special agent with INS. So I've been really, close to the actual officers and special agents. So in that capacity, I not only work-wise, but, in a professional setting, I've talked at home about, all different issues, and this never came up. Like everything was de-escalated. I was always so proud of the federal government because, as opposed to the local police officers and such forth, where you see some questionable issues and use of force, the federal government didn't engage in this type of behavior of following what it looked like to me. Tell me what you think, Rob. But it looked like to me a legal observer. This is a person just legally observing in their own neighborhood. Apparently, the neighbor said she was a neighbor. 38 years old mother, apparently a poet too. She was leaving the neighborhood. She was trying to leave the neighborhood at that point, and the officer, as I see, walks up to the car. She's not going to the officer. She's not running over officers. I didn't even see an officer stand in front of the vehicle in this case. So, but that would be going from a place of danger, place of safety, to a place of danger. So the officer would be putting himself in there, and she's not a target of anything. She's done nothing wrong, but even if she has, the best case is to get a warrant for her arrest, go back and get her, and you don't stand in front of a vehicle. We don't train to stand in front of a vehicle, and that's not what I saw happen here either. What I saw is a man shoot a woman point blank that was trying to leave her neighborhood. What are your thoughts, Rob?
Well, the thing that I find interesting about that video is when it starts, and I'd love to have an hour or 2 hours before that video, because when the video starts, I don't know what happened up till that point, but her car is sideways in the road, and I don't understand why it's sideways in the road.
Okay.
And even as a lot of the commentary and some of the video postings talk about, that she waved a car through, and you see it at the beginning of the video. A car does go around the front of her car and continues down the road, and that's about the time that the ICE truck pulls up. So I don't know what led her to being in that situation where her car is sideways in the road.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. Let's just assume, okay, let's do some arguments here. Assume that she was blocking the officers in. Let's just assume that. Is that now she's trying to leave, it looks like. So that means she's going, if that's what she's doing, it looks like she's trying to leave, maybe backing up. And we can go on the other scenario. Maybe she's in that position because we didn't see the beginning and she was just trying to do a 3-point turn.
Yeah.
In the
That's
road.
it. And that's in my mind, that's the critical thing. We don't know why she was in that position or anything about that. Yeah.
Shooting her, is that justified? Like, again, the use of force policy is to protect the life of the officer, agents, or a third party. Life. I didn't see her threatening a life at that point. I don't see her running over any officers. I don't see her going towards a crowd.
Yeah.
She looks like she wants to leave the area.
Yeah. I think, and I spent, some years as a prosecutor as well. And I think one of the considerations for me, and this is why I tell people in my family, that's why I tell my clients, everybody, that once that contact is initiated with the officer, once the officer walks up to the window of your car, if you want to exercise your Fifth Amendment right and just sit there silently, that's fine. If you want to protest, whatever, all that's fine. But once that contact is initiated, and if those officers, and I whatever verbal commands I heard, swear words was pretty much it.
Stop. Okay.
But when there's verbal commands of you're under arrest or stop or get out, and anything you do other than comply can have very, very negative consequences. Doesn't make it right.
But you can't just because you want to arrest.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But once the officers approached the car and once she took off or tried to take off or move the car in any way, the officers don't know what the intent is. And that's why we don't know what led up to that. If she
that could
was
be
like
any of us, Rob. I have to butt in on this one only because that could be any of us. That we can't, as federal officers, particularly anyone who's given a gun as part of their job, has to show restraint.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. And if this is a person who's trying to make a 3-point turn, or maybe it was icy and she slid and got into an awkward position, in the officer's approach, if you just comply, it doesn't go wrong. When you comply, and it doesn't, I'm not saying that the officer was right in shooting her or anything like that. I'm just saying that when you don't comply, things can get bad.
I agree with that. I tell everyone comply, we can sue later. I tell my daughter that as well. Just comply. Yeah. But on the other hand, okay, because we're supposed to be a free country, and everybody who says their First Amendment rights does not make them a domestic terrorist. I can disagree with you. You can disagree with me.
Yeah.
We can disagree with this president, that president. It doesn't matter. And as long as we're not threatening lives, we're not a domestic terrorist. And you can't change the definition of that by an executive order. Now, you make some great points. But I still don't see, if I were to show up at any place just to legally observe or to protest, that if they, now I get it, I'm going to stop because I don't trust that people won't use. I think that there is just a lack of restraint these days.
Yeah.
And and the leaders, unfortunately, if you're giving the carte blanche to do whatever you want, it's, and you're not held more accountable for having more restraint, this is going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that is, I think that's maybe one of the biggest takeaways. And anytime a gun is out of the holster and in somebody's hands, bad things can happen, and that's that's what happens. That could be what happened here. That may not be what happened here. It could have been anything. But the one thing I do know, that I firmly believe, is that if she had just put her hands on the steering wheel
but we don't know if she didn't. I can't see that.
Well, yeah, you don't, but we do know that she tried to pull away.
But that doesn't mean both hands aren't on the steering wheel.
Well, no, I get it. It also doesn't mean that she tried to pull away, because how many times has your foot slipped off the brake when you're trying to shift gear and the car lurches forward?
And I grew up in New Hampshire, so I know snow.
Yeah.
Like her vehicle could have slipped too, and the officer being, I'm not going to say paranoid, but I am going to say paranoid, or just with the things that have happened with some of the protesters driving through agents. That has happened. That they were worried that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. And I do feel for these officers and agents, because I don't know how that particular agent was trained. I don't know if they gave him a rapid training. I don't know if they gave him the appropriate training. I feel they put these officers and these new agents and officers in a very bad position to ruin their lives, their careers, and also for American public.
Well, and this is, this firmly puts us into the realm of speculation, because I haven't even bothered to Google or ChatGPT this, but I had heard a report on the news that perhaps there was someone involved on the DHS side that had recently been struck and dragged by a car in a similar situation within the last, couple of months.
Oh, that's going to cause post-traumatic stress.
Well, yeah, and it also heightens the tensions and the fears. And
it's going to trigger whenever a car's moving.
Yeah. So, I don't know anything about anything, frankly, but if there was that history, it creates an issue of, is DHS or is the government effectively helping our agents, get back to work, get through the process? I mean, let's just say in some other incident, some other officer involved shooting. If that officer had recently just been attacked and now he is in the exact same situation and he maybe shoots a little bit quicker than he should have, or she, the officer still has liability, but what led to that officer getting put into that position? And so, I mean, it just goes to the overall.
Yeah, and maybe the agency's liability more than the officers if they don't
put them in place. Yeah,
I mean, people like that situation you just mentioned, Rob. That particular officer, and I know the agency does not provide this. And, especially with the officers and agents, they don't want to admit weaknesses, right? They don't want to admit, I need some time off, because they want to appear strong and, vibrant and ready to go. But that does create post-traumatic stress syndrome, which will be triggered by anything that's similar to that. So a car moving, like you said, if they had been in an incident like that, a car moving. But the agency needs to think about the liability to the agency. And that's usually what they care about most times, most administrations. And in this particular case, if you put an agent or officer back out there who can be that easily triggered, they may shoot an innocent bystander. Because like you said, even just being off a little bit, let's say they are justified in what they are doing. If they're off a little bit because of the fact they need some extra time off and some therapy, some counseling for what they went through.
And so, we don't know what, like, I've talked to immigration judges and I've talked to people with OPLA. You probably have too. And we know that they're under a lot of pressure and stress and, handling massive numbers of cases. I was in court yesterday, and the judge from 1 to 5, normal afternoon schedule, 28 bond hearings were scheduled.
Bond hearings?
Bond hearings that judge had to get through in one afternoon.
I don't think people who haven't done them don't understand how that's I've never seen that amount.
Yeah, so everybody on both sides is under a tremendous amount of stress and pressure, and in situations like that, bad things are going to happen. Yeah. And look, if this woman was trying to get away from the officers, and she did speed away from an attempted arrest and they let her go, but at that crosswalk was a little girl going to school and she splatted her, those officers are going to be in just as much trouble for not acting more aggressively to stop the person that was fleeing.
Well, that's assuming a lot of facts.
It assumes a lot of things, but you have all those things. I think it comes back to, though, the issue is, and you're in the best position to comment on this, I don't believe that the DHS officers have sufficient non-lethal means in these situations. Are they?
Well, they have tasers. I don't know. They've been trained on tasers. All the deportation officers have been trained on tasers. I should say all, but
yeah,
they do have taser training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. Definitely when they go for their second round of training in Charleston, South Carolina, where I taught, they do taser training there.
Is it mandatory equipment though?
I don't think it's mandatory, but I do think that they are all trained on it when they go down for, and that's usually, now again, things change, but the deportation officer transition, the extra training they do when they're about 2 years in, down in Charleston, South Carolina, is a mandatory training on the taser, and they get, use of force tactics training again. Yeah. Further baton training. They have batons too.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
Why didn't you just hit her hand with a baton?
And when those non-lethal types of equipment are not mandatory, and I know these guys carry a ton of weight on them. I mean, I don't know. I worked more with police officers than federal agents, but I don't know a single police officer in his 50s that doesn't have back problems from all the weight that they carried their whole career. But it's extra equipment. And the one thing that, from a technological standpoint, the one thing that I can't believe doesn't exist, and I think about it every time I see one of those 200-mile-an-hour motorcycle chases, right, is some sort of, automatic shutoff device that, cops can point at a car and it fries the electricals or something. Surprised that doesn't exist. But yeah, I mean, it could have went.
U.S. citizen, I still think they're being encouraged to engage with the public in ways they shouldn't be. That's not their target. Go after your target. Your target is the the particular person who's here unauthorized
Yeah.
or illegal, you go after your target. You're wasting resources too. Never mind, you're creating liability for the agency. This is the way we've always thought of it as attorneys too. Don't create liability for the agency. Everything is about avoiding liability. Do your job. We give you the tools and the skills and the knowledge necessary, but don't abuse it and don't create liability for the agency. And to me, running after a so-called protester who's really just watching what's going on, let's assume that's what she was doing, and now she's leaving because they threatened to arrest. Maybe they did threaten to arrest her. Maybe she stood there and filmed, and they said don't film, and they whatever, they threatened to arrest her, and then she's leaving with her filming, and they want to arrest her now, or they want the camera. We don't know, but what we do know is she's a U.S. citizen. She's they've got no legal grounds based on alienage to arrest her.
Yeah.
So they're wondering what authority this person even has to detain them. So and I know they're going to say their general arrest authority, which they didn't used to utilize, which is they have the right to, by the way, public, if you're watching this, they have the right, deportation officers and special agents have more authority. But the deportation officers do have the right to arrest somebody who is committing a federal misdemeanor or felony in their presence. So if it's being committed in their presence, they do. And if they say you're obstructing justice or that you assaulted an officer, even if you didn't, if that's what they are saying, they are alleging something that gives them the justification to make the arrest. So just comply, and you can fight the battle later.
And that's why I go back to what happened in that, even maybe 5 minutes before that video starts. Why is the car sideways in the road? Are they in hot pursuit of someone and she cuts them off?
Deportation officers are forbidden from hot pursuit.
I understand, but you just what put everybody in that position, and I think that answer weighs in a little bit into, was the officer's actions way out of line, or was it a little bit out of line, or was it even completely justified?
I think way out of line, but that's me. And I think most of we can't have this in this country. If you can't stand on the side of your neighborhood and legally observe and then decide you're going to leave your neighborhood, assuming, again, that's what happened, as a U.S. citizen, and ICE is going to detain me? I mean, I know that if I'm just protesting, that's not illegal. Now, this administration wants to make it illegal. They want to call it domestic terrorism. They want to call immigration attorneys domestic terrorists. So just saying that alone does not make it true, but encouraging these officers to shoot at somebody instead of, there's no justification. I don't believe their life was threatened, and I think they're gonna try to fit it because of the liability and how bad it looks. But I don't know. I'm sad because if they keep doing this, it's going to keep happening, and it's going to get worse and worse. It's going to be a child. It's going to be. It's a mother, and she should have been alive to go home to her children.
Yeah. Well, and I always, in any of these kind of cases, I always think back to that. I can't remember the little kid's name now.
Gonzalez.
It was way back in the Janet Reno days.
Yeah, Elian Gonzalez.
Yeah, Elian Gonzalez. That photograph of with
the kid with all these.
Yeah, with a big gun, and anytime the guns are out and anytime hands are near the triggers, it can go bad, and it's very disturbing. So,
Rob, I know you're going to have to go soon. So, is there anything else like you want to catch us up on before you go?
Well, no, I think a lot of good news on the California class action on the bond cases. I don't know if you're
No, tell me,
been
tell me.
been doing a lot, but the immigration courts have been granting bond in the cases that were previously mandatory detention, based on the federal court case out in California, Maldonado Batista. So I've seen a good bit of those, and got some bonds granted. The the, the backlog in the bond cases is significant. I've seen. I think I just mentioned the judge the other day had 28 of them on his calendar from between 1 and 5 bond hearings. It's, you know, to get a bond hearing done in less than 20-30 minutes if it's contested is even 20-30 minutes is pushing it. And I think in the bond hearings, the one thing that I have seen is there definitely does seem to be a higher standard being applied.
To
You know,
who? To who?
to the
Government?
individual seeking release.
Oh, to the response.
And
Okay.
yeah, and you know,
Hmm.
up until the last year, when you argued a bond, if the person had lived in the community, had lived and worked for 20 years in the community, and never committed any crimes, that was something favorable
Yeah,
that you would raise in a bond hearing.
sure.
Seeing it be looked at a little bit different now, that hey, you've been here for 20 years, you haven't done anything to get yourself straight, you haven't filed anything, you've been living and not, working without authorization, being looked at in a little different direction. And it reminds me very much of, if you recall, after the St. Cyr decision way back when they said, no, you can't retroactively take away the 212C relief for people with
Mhm.
crimes. That first year or so, they started applying the higher standard, and then people had to go back and litigate and say, no, the pre-St. Cyr approval rates for 212Cs were 60, 70%. And so now you have to apply those same standards. And there's case law after that no, you have to apply those same standards. So I think that's one of the things, practitioners and people seeking bonds should be aware of, that, hey, judge,
That's interesting. I would think, though, you
that's
could
my gold
argue
standard.
back. Well, it's a good thing they didn't put in for any fraudulent forms of relief.
Yeah,
I mean, they could have married a U.S. citizen, and then, I mean, in this
it's
case,
even worse off. Yeah,
they chose to actually not clog up the system with asylum. They chose, even though they might have come from a country that had issues, they chose not to marry a U.S. citizen. They chose not to go out and, let's just say on the fraudulent side. I'm not saying
Yeah.
there's a lot of U visas that are legitimate, but let's say on the fraudulent side, they chose not to go out and pay someone to rob them. I mean, these are good things. And the entire time they're probably being exploited, and they deserve a T visa because they're not in status, so they're more likely to be exploited.
that was something I was gonna call you about last week, anyways, because I wanted to talk to you about that. Was you mentioned a couple episodes ago about, we were talking about T visas and T visas for people that were, quote unquote forcibly, but when you're an infant and your parents bring you to the United States, and
Yep.
now you've been here 20, 25 years,
Yep.
you didn't have a choice in that.
I have a case like that. And not only was that particular person brought here approximately that amount of time ago, but when he was brought, I think I might have told you this. He was given Benadryl when they brought him across the border, and was held by some woman that watched him in the shower while she was on the toilet naked. First time he'd been exposed to that, and she was watching him naked, and he had to bring. He remembers being given a backpack, and the backpack was bigger than him,
Yeah.
and he had to bring it to the neighbor's apartment, and he didn't know what they were at the time, but it was a bunch of VHS tapes. And he doesn't know what's on those tapes, but now you put it together years later and you put together the fact that this woman, what she was doing with him in the bathroom, she could have been filming him
Yeah.
unbeknownst to him. But also there was some guy that came in a Barney costume. And when he woke up, he saw this guy in a Barney. When he got to the house, he woke up with a guy in a Barney costume. You could hear a man's voice in a Barney costume in the woman's apartment. Like, these are the faint memories from when he was a very young toddler. You know, he wasn't just human trafficked. I mean, I think there's an element of sex trafficking there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard to prove in those kind of cases.
Oh, it's hard to prove, but you just tell the facts as you know them.
Yeah, but have you seen those types of visas be successful for people that really had a relatively normal life? They
Yes.
just brought here as a child and lived with mom and dad till they were
Yes.
graduated from high school, and now I got no place to go.
I've had two. I just got another T visa grant just a week and a half ago. And that was on a person who was exploited by their employer and not paid overtime. And they had to pay the electricity bill for the store as well, and pay their rent. So they were subjected to a debt bondage situation and, forced labor with the overtime not being paid, which is a form of indentured servitude as well. And that was granted. And I'm waiting on the other ones. The Trump administration has been slow. So this is, but yeah, I have had a child granted as well. And all he was smuggled as an 11, 12-year-old over the border. His parents paid someone. And the ironic thing about this is the child could have come under parole because the parents have a pending U visa and could have filed a federal lawsuit back. Trump doesn't want to do it now, but back under Biden, you could file a lawsuit. And I got somebody paroled here under the fact that it's like, if you can't do the bona fide determination, you can parole them in, their children in. So in this particular case, this child could have been paroled in, but they paid a smuggler like $12,000 or so to smuggle this child with some strangers through the southern land border. Anything could have happened to this child, but it was granted. Good. I'm sorry, the bona fide determination was made. It's not yet, but we got a bona fide determination. So,
well, and I see it because I've seen a lot of people recently that, because of the current climate, the current enforcement climate, people are, hey, what can I do? And there's a lot of people that, came as babies, had no say in that, lived, worked, grew up.
They're human trafficking victims of maybe of their own parents. And yes, the law provides an exception, thankfully, for the prosecution of the parents or the removal of the parents for that.
Yeah.
But the child is still a victim of human trafficking.
Yeah. He didn't ask to be ripped from wherever country,
Nope. And he didn't choose to be smuggled in. But I've even, when I've talked to people about the labor trafficking situations, and I've talked to them about how they got to the United States, I've questioned them on their traveling here. And just because they put themselves into that position of being with the coyotes does not mean they signed up for what happened to them along the way.
Right.
So being held in a safe house and being subjected to the beatings or being beaten once, and hearing women in the other room crying because they didn't make the payment and things are happening to them that they can't see, but they can imagine. Like, these things happen and they don't even realize when they're telling you the story that they're a victim of human trafficking, despite the fact that they voluntarily put themselves in that situation. They didn't sign up for seeing. I had another client tell me recently on his journey to the United States, not knowing also that what he told me also made him a human trafficking victim. They were making them walk for 20 days through Honduras, Guatemala, handing them off to different cartel groups. And as they're walking through some of these countries, I think it was Honduras particularly, where they saw severed body parts on the side of the road. And they were trying to get them to take a white powdery substance, a drug, which we know is cocaine,
Yeah.
because they didn't want to feed them much and they wanted them to keep walking like for like 20 hours a day. So this one particular client refused to take it, and he said they used some kind of like thing that whipped him. So I mean, he's a human trafficking victim, even though he put himself into it.
Yeah, and that's one of the most difficult things about the first time you meet with somebody that's a potential client is digging through some of those details that they don't even recognize are important. Well, that's just what to expect. Well, no, those are important details
Right.
that really go to, maybe your asylum claim or maybe your trafficking victim claim or victim of crime even. And
Well,
the
that's true.
labor the labor stuff is huge because
The
all that
labor stuff is huge.
yeah.
They
And
they don't put it together. See, I can tell from the business owners what's kind of going on. And I won't say too much on that except to say that I will say it on the victim side of it is the moment they are paying that human trafficker that they call a travel agent in some countries,
mhm.
they're there's other people in the United States that are looking for employees. So everybody's going to benefit off of this in that world of this one person who's vulnerable
Mhm.
and needs to get out of India for whatever reason, maybe some political reasons, but financial, of course. Um, and they come to the United States. Maybe they have a family member here, or maybe they just heard this is where they can make it. And the fact is, they put themselves into that position, true, but they get exploited along the way and they become victimized over and over and over again.
Yeah, and getting you know getting a person to recognize that is an issue or understand that is an issue is sometimes difficult, and you know a lot of people don't want to. They feel like they're telling on somebody or
Mm-hmm.
something. But yeah, it's definitely something you have to explore with every potential client. To go through the history and find out what's really happened.
Yeah, and they're anonymous if when they report it to the labor department. And, it could have been something that happened 20 years ago. I try to explain to them, don't be afraid because, you know, this happened to you. And it's, even if you put yourself in the situation, you're still a victim.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, all you can do is explain to people what their options are and tell them what the rules and the laws are with respect to all the different types, and they have to
Mhm.
make that decision what they want to do.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll go, and I'll pack up my stuff and head to the other office for a few days.
Well, have a safe trip and
All
I'll
right.
talk to you when you get back.
Yeah, sounds good. Maybe talk next week or something. Maybe.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll see
I gotta find my little stop. Leave.
you.